Well, good afternoon and welcome to East Devon District Council's Audit and Governance Committee meeting on the 19th of March 2026. I'm your chair, Councillor Chris Burrett. I'd also like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via the live streaming. Any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website, which is www.eastdevon.gov.uk. We're not expecting a fire alarm test, so if the fire alarm does go off, please proceed in an orderly fashion, following the green running man, here, here, or here, and we assemble on the car park. Thank you very much. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call and declaration of interests of committee members here present. Over to you, Amanda. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Starting with yourself, Councillor Burrett.
I am present and I have no interest to declare. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Present, no interests.
Councillor Barlow.
Present and no declaration that I'm aware of.
Thank you. Councillor Collins.
Present, no declaration.
Thank you. Councillor Goodman.
Present, no declaration of interests.
Thank you. Councillor King. Councillor Levine.
Present and I'm not interested.
Councillor Brown.
Present, no declarations.
Present, no declarations.
Thank you. We're definitely quorate. I just point out, as we were using the microphones there, a couple of them just flash green rather than red. So if they're going green, we're not hearing you. So just keep an eye on that and wait for it to go red if you can, please. Thanks. So we go to agenda item 1, which is minutes of the previous meeting. If anyone has a comment on the sets of minutes from the 29th of January 2026, please do this by raising your hand. If I see no hands raised, I'll take this as an indication that you all agree to the minutes of the previous meeting. And that's no hands raised, so thank you. The previous meeting minutes are recommended to be agreed. Oh, there's a second page here. Good. Agenda item apologies. I believe we've got Councillor Fitzgerald. Thank you. And item 3 is declarations of interest, which we've done. Item 4 is public speaking. We have no members of the public registered to speak, I take it, and there are none in attendance. I'm very sorry to hear. I'm sure they're all basking in their back gardens watching this online. Item 5, any late items or matters of urgency? I have none. And item 6, confidential or exempt items? There are none. So we move to item 7, which is minutes of the Information Governance Board, which is held on 25th of February 2026, and that's on pages 7 to 9. So this would have been, we would have had Mel here, so I should have introduced a few people, sorry. We've got James, sorry. James standing in the legal side for Melanie Wellman, and but not expecting you to deliver anything on this report, so just be here in advisory capacity if that's okay. So does anybody have any questions? I think the recommendation is for us to simply acknowledge the report and all the minutes. So has anybody got any questions or comments? Yes.
Yes, thank you, Chair. On the what was agreed, one of it was to have some training on cyber attacks for audit and governance, and I just wondered, is that going to be progress? Are we likely to get it in the short term, because it seemed quite an important thing to be doing?
It's a very good question. I don't think we've got any
I'll follow up on that.
knowledge here, but we'll pick up on that. Thank you, Councillor Goodman. Yeah. Okay. Anything else that anybody wishes to raise? So, I mean, for those who aren't familiar with the information governance work, Councillor Loudon and myself sit on it, and it's not a public committee, so we scrutinise what's going on in terms of information control and governance on behalf of the council, and we meet roughly quarterly. So that's what's going on behind the scenes, and this is an annual report on that. Okay, in that case, I believe we were simply here to note that, and we will move on to the next item, which is item 8, Internal Audit Activity Report, which is Q3, a report presented by Conor McLaughlin, and he's the Principal Auditor for SWAP. Over to you, Conor. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. So the report starts on page 12 of your agenda pack. I'll just very quickly run through the highlights. So in terms of our progress against the 25-26 internal audit plan, we have now started 19 of the 20 audits that were included in that plan. On page 17, there is a chart that gives you a breakdown of the status of the plan. In this report, it says that 12 of the 20 audits are completed. We've actually completed one further audit since this report was written. That is the Community Infrastructure Levy audit, which was finalised with a reasonable opinion. The remaining audit that has not yet started is the bank reconciliation audit. We've scheduled an initial meeting for that next week. Given where we are at the moment with 19 of the 20 audits either completed or underway, we're confident that we'll be able to complete the plan in time for the annual opinion. But move on to the next section. There have been 2 limited assurance audits since our last report. Summaries of those audits are included on pages 19 and 20 of the agenda pack. I'm going to focus on the contract management audit, which was on page 20, where we've concluded that there is a high organisational risk to the council. This review focused on the management of contracts valued between 50k and 150k. I think we've reported here previously in other audits that the council doesn't have a fully complete contract register at the moment. We have noticed some improvement in that regard, but it still looks a bit sparse. During this audit, we did sample testing on a sample of contracts, and that testing identified a range of issues, including contract managers that aren't aware of current guidance that's in place, contracts that had no performance frameworks in place, contracts that had no spend monitoring by the contract manager, some contracts with undocumented contract variations, and also some possible breaches of the contract standing orders, where due to recurring purchases higher than the stipulated threshold, there may need to be a contract put into place. Our conclusion from that review is that there's a need to develop a better oversight and assurance mechanism to improve contract management as a whole. That includes the need to identify a clear strategic lead to oversee contract management, to reinforce the current standards and introduce training to help enforce that. Because of the findings that we had, as well as a lack of clarity about actually how many contracts the council has, we've concluded this is a high organisational risk. To somewhat balance that, there have been 4 follow-up audits completed since our last report, all of which have been positive. Most of the actions from these limited audits have been implemented. The most significant of those is the housing electrical safety audit, which is on page 23. This is an audit we'd previously assessed as being a high organisational risk. During the follow-up audit, we observed significant improvement in this area. In terms of remedial actions, which was one of the concerns we raised originally, those have gone from 893 outstanding in August 2024 down to 220 at the time of this report. We also noted that the council is now being clearer with the contractor about their responsibility to fix significant issues that they identify at the time of the original visits. So before, we had a situation where the contractor was sometimes leaving the property and then quite a significant backlog of remedial actions was developing. Because the contractor is now doing this at the time of the visit, that is going to prevent future backlogs from forming. The other key thing to note here is that there's been an investment in some new software which will help manage not just electrical safety, but the other compliance areas within the housing function. So we're happy to see that. If I move on to the next area, which is the outstanding actions from internal audits, there's been a reduction since our last report. There were 82 in the previous report. This is now reduced down to 60. In the last month, we've been working with ELT on a review of all of the outstanding internal audit actions. We've got progress updates for all actions. As part of this, we've asked action owners to consider, one, whether their actions are still relevant. Some of the actions were fairly aged. So whether they're still relevant, whether they're still achievable, and whether they still present an issue with things as they are now. From that, there have been a couple of older actions that have been closed off. So from that, there's been a couple of older actions that have been closed off. Those closures have been agreed by senior management, so we haven't just closed off actions based on nothing. And the outcome of that exercise is that the number of overall actions has reduced significantly, and the actions from audits that were sort of pre-24-25 have now largely been closed. On page 26 of the agenda pack, you'll have a table that breaks down the number of actions outstanding from each audit. So there are still 2 audits there from 23-24, information governance and performance management. These audits are still awaiting follow-up. We're waiting for management to tell us that the action's been completed. Follow-up audits for those 2 areas are programmed into next year's plan. Another thing that we've done in recent months is now we're reporting on action tracking every month to ELT, so they get an overview of what's happening and how things are moving, so they can step in when needed. On pages 27 and 28, there are 2 actions in here that were overdue at the time I wrote the report. Both of those actions, we've now had updates on them, and they've been assessed as being complete, so I don't intend to talk about these actions any further. And in Appendix E, which starts on pages 30 and 31, that gives you the status of every audit. There are a couple of audits in the plan that have been deferred for various reasons, and those are outlined in that appendix. I think that's all I have to say on this report, so happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Who would like to speak? Councillor Barlow.
It's not really questions. It's just I read the contract management final report. We got an email saying that we had a report had been sent to the library, and I had to delve and had to look at it. And to say I was concerned, and I can understand why it's a high risk. You know, it's unbelievable that we can. If you think about our money, £19 million of turnover, a big old chunk of it goes on staff who deliver a certain amount. All the rest of it goes on contracts of various sorts, I would imagine. And we're supposed to deliver and guarantee that we are delivering best value. How on earth can we deliver and guarantee we are delivering best value if we don't know if the contracts are being chased up? Could do the best contract in the world, but if someone is then, as companies can do, as we know, they're not always as honest as the council. At the end of the day, we can't just bury this and leave this for 6 months, 3 months, 2 months. Melanie, I know, is supposed to be taking on the contracts thing. I remember we queried this back along.
So just check with Simon, who's the owner of this process, I guess.
But she took it over very recently. She said she was taking it over, because I remember querying, because again, I queried a contract, and it was like, you're not allowed to query officers' expertise or mention it, because that's not the done thing. But she said that she was taking over, and I queried her knowledge of this area, but she assured us that she had come from somewhere where she knew this. I just think that we need to do something, whether this goes to overview or scrutiny or somewhere, to delve into this a lot more, because, and I understand that we now know we have a problem, but what are we going to do with it to sort it now? Not in 3 to 6 months' time, Because, you know, to me, there was a contract the other day that had failed, something we'd failed, that was point up for various reasons, and then we've given a contract to the same contractor that had failed on that, on another job. And you're thinking, why would you do that? And again, the excuse was, oh, it was various reasons. But of course, if we're not looking at the contract, how do we know? And again, this is for 50 to 150,000. We're giving out contracts for millions and millions of pounds in a minute. You know, the chance of, you know, again, fraud is another thing. You know, fraud, best value, everything hangs around. You give a contract out, you can do the best contract in the world, but if no one's actually implementing it and no one's checking on it, what's the point? You might as well just say, here's our checkbook, fill it in. So that's my point. It's not really a question.
Okay, but it does raise interesting questions of overview and scrutiny, really. And I'm using those with small letters rather than capital letters. So, you know, and it warrants a little bit of discussion here, I think. So I'm concerned with the findings, and I think this committee is well, it's within the scope of this committee, I would attest, for us to say we want some assurance on the procedures that are in place for contract management and the adherence to the contract. So contract gets placed, it's one thing, you know, it gets agreed, signed off, that's a procedure. How that then gets implemented and communicated to staff who are administering the ordering process in conjunction with that, associated with that contract, and then how that translates into verification of the delivery of the goods or services and the subsequent payment for that. You know, how does that all link together? Because this is concerning, and it kind of implies that if it wobbles at the first bit, you know, where we're not even getting, it's not, that's probably a good way of putting it, Ian. It's not solid. So we need some assurance on this. I would suggest maybe when it comes to the forward plan, we ask for something on the forward plan. We'll have a look at the forward plan and look at what the capacity is for it in the next meeting, but maybe we look at, you know, 3 months after that. But, you know, certainly within 6 months, I think we want some assurance. And notwithstanding, we've got LGR. So, you know, the LGR side is going to require assurance in its own right. So, yes, Ian. Sorry.
Well, just to come back on that, I was going to say, yes, great, but 6 months, you know, 19 million quid, how much are we losing? I just think that we should put proper dates in here, and we want Melanie to come back with, you say about the steps, 4 contracts weren't signed by both parties, which means they're unenforceable anyway. It's like you almost couldn't make it up. It's so basic management. It's almost unbelievable.
Councillor Goodman.
I've got some other points other than this one, but let me just say on the contracts. What concerned me when I read this report, we had a report came to us in July 2025 on contracts, recognising problems. Here we are now, 7, 8 months later, or more, 9 months later, we've still got problems. And I suppose the one thing that worries me when I read, like Ian did, and I have to say that library's fantastic because it gives you all the details that, you know, the main reports don't. But the one thing I said to myself, and you won't be able to answer this, is this costing us money? Is this costing us money that should be spent or held, not being spent on things like contracts not being right? It worries me how much it's costing us.
So thank you. Rob.
Thank you, Chair. You know, with my independent person hat on, and someone who deals with sort of contracts and finance on a daily basis, I was very disappointed and slightly worried about the responses. I think particularly because it comes on a trail of previous problems. I appreciate that, you know, management resource in local government generally and this authority in particular is always tight because of funding, and I know there's been the procurement manager being recruited or has been only recently recruited or wherever the state is. But I mean, this is really basic stuff, and for it to end up with a high audit is, you know, and the public, this is the sort of stuff they expect you to get roughly right, and I agree with the councillors. It's got to be managed. We can't have actions going on to this which are like some of the other actions which are 12, 18 months outstanding, because the problem will come up. You know, you're playing with a risk. The other thing I'd say is this isn't, as far as I can see, reflected on the risk register. We'll come on to the health and safety one later, and there's some comments on that, but at least that's on the risk register. This isn't even on the risk register, and I think that, especially now, given the result of this audit, it needs to be a significant corporate risk. It's just very disappointing that it's got that bad an audit result, really, for something that should be the bread and butter of every local authority and every manager. You know, when I went into public sector for the first time, I was taught, treat it as if it's your own money. Would you do that with your own money? I wouldn't give £150,000 potentially to someone of my own money and not even sign a contract or not monitor how they're spending it. And I wouldn't expect any manager in the authority to do that either.
Thank you. Ian, yeah.
Just an actual question to swap. At what point on the register thing of limited do you get to know? Because not being funny, there isn't anything on here that is good on this. And how do you get to know? Or do we just not issue them because that's bad?
Connor, would you want to come back on that specific point?
Yeah. So a no assurance would apply. There were absolutely no controls or framework at all. It would have to be completely and utterly dire to be a no assurance, which is why they're quite rare.
Just whilst I've got you, Connor, just in context of how this particular audit came to be done, who commissioned it? Was it part and parcel of this committee in terms of its forward plan? Because I can't recall, and I probably should be able to, but off the top of my head, I can't recall whether we scoped it or whether it's something that was scoped by ELT.
So the request for the audit came from Melanie herself, actually, as the director of the service, taking it over. So that was where the audit came from, and it was obviously incorporated into the previous internal audit plan that you would have seen and approved.
So, I mean, I'll take some encouragement from that. Thank you, because actually that's us owning the problem. Us, and I'm saying audit. East Devon senior management team owning the problem, commissioning a report into the problem, identifying the problem, and now we've got a load of actions. So I don't want to knee jerk on it because it's not something that we've uncovered ourselves. It feels like, and Melanie isn't here to answer it, and it's not fair to do this without her, I think. But I think it's something that we should put on the agenda for next meeting to give her a chance to answer to it, if you like, and say, well, how are we doing on the recommendations, and do you have, can you give us more assurances, if you like? So I think that's the way to treat it. Simon, would you agree with that?
I would. There are a number of actions in train that Melanie's kicked off already, but I do completely understand the committee's concerns in this area. So I think it would be a good way forward to actually just have an update from the director involved. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll move on to well, Councillor Goodman, you take us forward on the next thing.
Let's look at a couple of the other points. The first one is, and you've not discussed it today in any length, is the report on asset transfer, which was put into the library. And that's why I just encourage all members to read it. I read it in a lot of detail. And it did concern me because the council operates, this is taking what it says, a broadly standard framework with appropriate governance and oversight. However, compared to peer authorities, its arrangements are less transparent, slower, and more lightly documented. And we had a lot of time spent on with the local government review. A lot of parish and town councils were asked to put in bids to take on some of the assets. And there's some big question marks about how this was done. And whilst I don't think you're going to give me an answer, but what I'm going to be recommending is I think this is something that needs to go back to the asset forum, the asset portfolio team to say, well, we need to put something in place to make sure we get this right. Because obviously it's not right, but because it's not, the high rate red, I think it can be put right relatively straightforward and take the advice that's been given us. That was the point one. Do you want to?
Whilst we've got that microphone.
Oh, sorry.
So out of each of these reports, whether they come out as limited, reasonable or none or whatever, will come a load of actions. Now, out of that report, no doubt, and kind of correct me if I'm wrong, will have come a number of actions. So those actions will be being done by officers as we speak. So I would suspect that that's the modus operandi for this, and I don't want to overlay further action requirements where if that's the case. So Connor, maybe you can give us some assurance on that.
Just add a little bit more context to this one. So the report was commissioned as an advisory review, so that there aren't any formal recommendations from us. As part of that, it was already recognised that there were issues in this system. This review was literally us just comparing what you do to councils that are around you and other comparators. And
who's acting on it?
Chair, that's why I said it could quite easily sit with the asset forum and the asset portfolio team, which are responsible for this.
Is this merely being so far reported back to us, or has it gone to others?
The report has gone to the place directorate, so all the director and assistant directors and the place director and the AD for assets. So how they take it forward, I don't know the answer beyond that.
So if the committee is in agreement, then what I'd recommend is we, as Councillor Goodman suggests, we ask that this is raised at the next asset management forum, and the report can be scrutinised at that forum, and required actions can be considered for improvement. For no further reason than that, but they should be aware, and officers that are associated with those processes should be aware, and it should be formal reading for them, if nothing else. Okay, is everyone happy with that as an action? Yeah. Okay. We haven't touched on the corporate health and safety report yet. Yehudi.
Technical thing. Do you think we could ask speakers to sit next to the microphone because we're having trouble hearing things? What were you talking about?
I don't know. What was I talking about?
Okay. Sorry, corporate health and safety. So, anybody got any comments on the corporate health and safety side? Yes, Mike.
Yeah, when I read this, it worried me as much as anything else, because health and safety and protecting our staff and residents and contractors is really important. And I was concerned when I read this. I then looked at when the item was discussed, personnel on health and safety, and looked at the policy that was done there. What the report didn't mention was your report, which surprised me. I thought it would have mentioned that it's being done. I also would say that report, it's a shame because it was done in January 2026, but the report is dated February 2026, which is an error, shall I say. And I understand what you said about some of the things are now being done, but again, there were 13 significant gaps in health and safety, and that is a concern to me. And I just want assurances really going forward that all those gaps have been dealt with. And I think, again, it goes back to Pratt's, when we look at the forward plan, just getting confirmation in 3 months' time, it's been done to protect our staff and residents. Thank you.
Matt, do you want to come in on this point?
Yeah, I have to say, honestly, it's very disappointing to have a limited assurance finding on the audit. And I do agree with Councillor Goodman, it is a really important area, absolutely critical. I think from our point of view, there was a slight frustration in as much as I think it's fair to say we'd actually asked for the audit. Because, we wanted some, we've been through a lot of change in corporate safety, and we are particularly interested in the level of resourcing that we allocate to it. So that was part of the reason for asking for the audit. And in some ways it was reassuring because I think most of the issues we'd already identified in our corporate action plan. So we knew a lot of these already. So whilst it confirmed some of them, doesn't suddenly make it right just because we knew about them. And we have a plan to deal with it. It's not a quick fix. There's probably many years of trying to catch up. I think the other thing to bear in mind, or I'd certainly ask committee to bear in mind on this particular issue, is we've been pushing for quite a while now to get a new corporate health and safety system. At the moment, we have a very outdated way of managing it. So it makes life very hard in terms of bringing stats, in putting our risk assessments in a centralised position, in terms of policies and procedures, that sort of thing. And it makes our life quite hard to manage it. It makes managers' life hard to actually deliver on the ground. So we're going through that procurement process as we speak. I think we're literally, if not quite there, probably not a good thing to say today. But I think we've done this one all right, I think, because Strata have been doing that. So we're just literally in the process, about to press the button on that, and we're starting to start implementing it in the next few months. That should make our life a lot easier in terms of managing health and safety, because I think what it doesn't necessarily bring out in this is there's a lot of good work going on at ground level. Which was easy for me to say, but I can tell you that I know, for instance, Oliver Hodgson, our health and safety specialist down on the street scene, he's in there every day talking to them, you know, working with them on the vehicles, giving them toolbox talks actually during the work period. So there's lots of really good stuff going on. We've just reintroduced the health and safety policy, updated that one completely. I think we've taken the view that the focus has been very much on the corporate health and safety system. And while some of the policies are out of date, significantly out of date in some cases, the actual content is still relevant. Most of it hasn't changed. There might be some titles, there might be some organisational changes that have happened, but fundamentally the information is pretty much still there. So they're not an immediate priority, whereas getting this structural element sorted out will make life a lot easier for everybody, and I think that's the focus at the minute. So we've got a structure where our principal environmental health officer is also a lead for corporate safety. He's going to be project managing the implementation of the new system over the next few months, and we're making a few amendments to how we deliver things in that time. But once we get that in, that should make a huge difference. But in the meantime, we are starting to tick off a number of those actions that were identified within the audit, and we've already completed quite a few of those. A few are kind of in process, so we've already done things towards them, but I can't say they're complete yet. So yeah, I'm disappointed as it wasn't too surprising, and we are on it.
The only thing, and thank you for that, is that the work you asked to be done was being done, but when it came to the report, personnel, that wasn't in the report. And I think that's important because you've recognised you need to do, you're doing it. You haven't got the final report yet, so those people signing off that report in January this year wouldn't have known you're doing it. And I just think for transparency and the work you're doing, it's better to share.
Yeah, Matt, thanks.
Sorry, just to come back on that really quickly. Yeah, I take your point, and making sure that we do keep people updated completely. I suppose the other thing just to bear in mind is that we did present the corporate health and safety plan as part of the annual review. Yeah. So that would have been in previously back in whenever we did it earlier in the year. But we had, to be fair, you're absolutely right, we didn't give an update. Yeah, so I take your point. It's all about communication, isn't it? Thank you.
Anybody else? Rob, thank
While I know what has just been said, I think it's slightly, you know, again, I'm very disappointed purely because some of the things that are missing and have been brought up by this audit is very basic actions. You know, not all areas having a nominated service safety officer, certain major sites not having an inspection. You know, you don't need a health and safety management system to get those basics, you know, for those basics to be that out of date. I appreciate when you get to the more complex options, like, you know, certain things haven't been signed off by the appropriate person, or having a training regime, they have significant cost and they're not going to be fixed overnight. And I think any reasonable person would understand that. But some of these, you know, you shouldn't need a health, you know, if you were aware that there were those problems, they should have been solved before the audit comes. I mean, if you look at the risk register, there is a risk, and I'm not sure that that risk is, when we get to that stage, has been updated properly to reflect, you know, what's going on. But as we all know, in today's litigious society, a health and safety failure has the potential to be very, very expensive. And what's more worrying about that is that if you haven't met your basic requirements, you will run into problems that your insurance may then not cover you for some of those costs, because the insurers will only cover you if you have taken reasonable steps. And I'm quite sure that some of these, if they had come to an incident, they would not be considered as reasonable steps. So again, I think it needs some, you know, I would hope that there would be some very serious management attention put to this over the next 6 months, because it's to me just an unacceptable state of affairs.
Matt, sorry, you want to come back?
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thank you. I agree completely. You know, it's an absolutely critical part of what we do. And as I say, there are areas in there that, you know, probably would want to get those sorted out quicker, and we're absolutely on it. I'll just pick up the two specific ones, and I think in one of them cases it does illustrate the problems that we have. Things like site inspections. All sites were getting inspections, but they weren't being done consistently. So some will get one type, one will get another type, and that got very confusing. So again, that will help with the new system that we're getting in. And as far as the service reps go, again, you're absolutely right. But unfortunately, what happened there was that we have the Central Joint Safety Panel, and there was a change in how that was administered, and it got missed. But because we were having other meetings, so for instance with the unions or whatever, and also reporting to Personnel Committee, it didn't get picked up for too long. Now, that doesn't make it right, but there were other meetings happening and service sort of representation. So it illustrates that we're not in we haven't been in a position where the structures are in place to manage it properly, but there were other things going on. And that's what we didn't have. We didn't have that coherent approach, which we're now trying to achieve.
Thank you. Councillor Barlow.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, I think we know risk to me is something you manage, but I understand as a big organisation, we need to do it properly. And things here, can I just ask, who is the cabinet member then, the portfolio holder for looking after this area? Because much as we have a role to play in this, and yeah, much as we are here to look into the detail, to get reports back on the rest of it, the point of cabinet is you have portfolio holders that look after and are there. They're paid £15,000, £16,000 extra to 10,000, whatever it is, to look into these things, that are given the time to do this. Who is in charge of all these areas we're looking at? Because I go to cabinet and it's like, yes, 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 vote, a little bit of debate on something, and they're over, we're looking to get home. And I know they've got lots of other things to do, but these are really critical areas we've looked at today, 2 of them, and they're bad. You know, the meeting hasn't happened since January 24, the Central Joint Safety Panel. I don't know who's supposed to check that happens, whatever, but again, you know, I just wonder, it's not even, I'm not criticising officers, I'm criticising who's supposed to be checking the officers is doing what they're supposed to be doing, or can say it, because it seems to me the whole system is not doing what it should be doing, and it's coming to us, and we're finding this out because, quite rightly, SWAP's done a long report on it, and it's 6 months in the making, and it's going to go in now, and hopefully it's all going to be done by June, even though, again, we're supposed to have procured this new system. We're always being blamed on there's a new system coming that's going to make everything wonderful, and I'm not a great believer in that either, but again, that's supposed to be done by the end of the 25-26 year. That's 3 weeks away, and at the end of the day, it's not going to be. So, again, who's responsible for it? And perhaps we should be having a word with Cabinet as well as to the responsibility of members of that.
Okay, I'll ponder that question just for a moment, but Fabian, you want to come in?
I think a simple answer is that we are, to a large degree, responsible for looking out for what comes through the reports. So I think we have this in hand in terms of reporting it. What has arisen in the last 2 subjects, I just have a query about, is HR involved? Because there's an element of it being a systemic issue, and I wouldn't begin asking questions about that because I have no information. But just as an observation, I think in my mind, since I was first elected in 2019 under what I can only describe as a different regime, there has been a lot of change within the organisation, and I think a lot of it has been definitely for the good. And in my experience, if you have, say, a responsibility for such as checking off and signing a contract, that needs to go side by side with a matching authority to do so. And you have to have, well, in management speak, the resource to go with it. I just wonder whether there's the right level of empowerment has been passed through the organisation to the officers to match their obligations, or what it is that is being expected of them when talking about such things as contract management or health and safety control. Thank you.
Well, we can't really answer on contract management, but we do have Matt here in terms of health and safety. So you may be able to give some insight onto that. Or before you go to that, what I would say is what leapt off the page to me on this particular report was that the Joint Safety Panel hadn't met for 2 years. Now, I don't know the ins and outs of machinations and processes involved, but from what's written here, it looks like it's integral to the oversight of how health and safety is operating within this organisation. And for it not to have met for 2 years means that people aren't prioritising it. Everybody's busy. There are always reasons why meetings shouldn't happen. Meetings are always described as the practical alternative to work. But in reality, this is critically important. And the level of importance starts at the top with the ELT, and if the ELT are in support of this, then they should be represented on that committee. So, and actually it should be at that level in my humble opinion. You should have an ELT member sitting on a panel that meets at least quarterly in an organisation of this size. And it should be, these types of issues and reports should be coming up through that committee. It should be overseeing the policies and having a report on, are we adhering to? What are our stats looking like? Do we have who's monitoring near misses? Who's monitoring, actual health and safety stats? We don't see it on here. The actual stats of number of accidents at work, or number of accidents on our premises by the public, or near misses. As we know, we want the triangle going of the number of near misses, which is proportionate to the number of accidents that you have. You want that base triangle of the near misses as big as possible, and that becomes cultural. I'm lecturing, so please forgive me. I don't mean to patronise anybody, but it's critical that level of input is put in from the ELT, and that culture disseminates down into the organisation. If the ELT are seen to support it, it gets done, as we've seen actually. And we'll, sort of going off a slight tangent, I'll come back to you in a moment. But the slight tangent, the number of recommendations and requirements and all the rest of it for internal audit has been absolutely dramatically transformed because ELT have owned it. They've taken it on. They report on it, as I understand, monthly. Mm-hmm. They look at the actions that are outstanding. They look at the age of them, and they're driving that improvement. And if it gets reviewed at that level, improvement comes. Fact. That's the same in every organisation. It's, to everybody's credit that we're seeing these numbers. We've got 20 recommendations or 23 recommendations from these two reports, and we've only got 60 recommendations outstanding on the whole lot. That's a tremendous improvement on where we were. We were in the hundreds before. So that's a tremendous improvement. However, on this particular one, that is really disappointing and really upsetting. Joint panel must meet, and it needs ELT's support on that, in my opinion. Sorry, Ian first, and then over to Rob.
Take the point about we are the ones to look at this, which is great, but we're the ones looking at it when there's an issue to be looked at. My point is, should it ever get to this stage, and the point is, I know ELT pick up on this, but surely there must be some sort of member, councillor representative to make sure that ELT are looking at these sort of things. I mean, I thought that was the point of cabinet. I'm not trying to pick fault with a party or anything. I don't care about party politics, never have done. But at the end of the day, someone is employed and paid to do this. Who is it? And are they not looking at the right things? Because it's pretty basic stuff. That's my point.
Thank you. Rob.
Yeah, I mean, the positive is the number of historical actions have gone down, even in my short time being an independent person on this committee. But to me, what concerns me is we've got two very poor audits here, but one of them, in the health and safety one, is on the back of the electrical housing one previously. Now, I appreciate they're different areas. One talking about corporate health and safety. One is, very specific on electrical and housing. But in my business, when you look at risk, you look for trends and you look for underlying matters. And I have great sympathy with the views expressed by the relevant councillors that, to me, it's indicative of not enough attention being put. But the fact that it gets to a bad audit means that something has, by definition, gone wrong prior to that point. And it's got to be focused. Now, whether that's by ELT, the cabinet process, which, again, my understanding is that is to provide more detailed oversight. That's how the cabinet process is supposed to work. Clearly, something is going wrong somewhere. And as an independent person, sort of looking at it from the person on the street, it just, to use a phrase, doesn't smell good.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to come in on this? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, Matt may want to come back on some of the specifics, But I guess in terms of the responsibility, it does rest with ELT. You know, I think the individual services you've looked at, management have identified that there are issues to address, and hence in both cases have asked for the audits to be undertaken to help in that process. So I think that's got to be recognised. Those actions have been agreed with the individual officers and ELT and are being worked through and monitored. And that's the role of this committee, to make sure those things happen on time, and you play a key role in that. And for example, with the contracts one, you're asking specifically, can we have something back on that? We need to understand it more. So I think the governance arrangements are actually working quite well. I do understand the concerns in some of this is basic, as you'd expect, you know, contracts being signed, health and safety. So there is a concern there at ELT level, but we are aware, and it is being tracked, monitored and implemented. There is a gap that we shouldn't perhaps have got into that position of those weaknesses being there, but better that we recognise it, are open and transparent about it, and then monitor progress and implementation than perhaps sweep it under the carpet. So I'd just sort of like to recognise that a lot of work's going into getting these things correct that perhaps haven't been corrected for a while.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that. And it's you know, really great that we've got a voice from ELT that's giving us that reassurance. Every single health and safety course that I've ever attended starts off with the question, who's responsible for health and safety? And the answer is, we all are, actually. So, you know, it is a corporate-wide responsibility. But Matt, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, thank you. Just to pick up on the monitoring aspect, last 12 to 18 months, we've been doing regular reports back to Personnel Committee, who have the oversight for that, and that includes all the statistics around near misses, accident reports, any trends, that sort of thing. And I know that Audit did pick up a little bit about us getting a little bit better than that, but part of the issue is having enough data to get the trends. So we're starting to build that in. So post 1st of April, we'll be doing the end of year update, so effectively fourth quarter update. We've got a report going to this month's Personnel Committee with the quarter 3 update, which went through ELT earlier this week. So the monitoring is happening. We've introduced that probably, let's say, in the last 12 to 18 months to sort of keep an eye on what's going on throughout the organisation. Coming back to the Central Joint Safety Panel, I can't argue with that one. Unfortunately, that was an oversight. However, there were other meetings happening. So, for instance, one of the key parts of the Central Joint Safety Panel is meeting with the union, and that happens elsewhere as well to talk about health and safety. So there is engagement through and you mentioned HR earlier, and HR very much front and centre on that too. So Jeremy, our principal EHO within this service, he would meet with his HR rep, usually Gemma, and the union representative to discuss many things, but including health and safety. So he kind of papered over the crack a little bit on that one. It's only when we realised that that had sort of fallen off the agenda that we've picked it up. And I would also point out that back in November we had a Central Joint Safety Panel meeting, and they were now setting those up on a regular basis. We've had to review the terms of reference. They've changed a little bit. We were looking at, like say, senior management representation on that. Rather than ELT, we've actually made SLT. So we've suggested that SLT form the rep. And in terms of attendance to that meeting, what we've recommended again is that one member of SLT for each directorate be a minimum requirement for each meeting that we have. And then obviously we'll have a employee rep from the same directorate too. So we're just going through, just pinning that down at the moment, because the original proposal wasn't really workable. It's causing a lot of questions, so we're just trying to sort that out at the minute. But once we've got that done, they'll be set up and running. So yeah, we're getting there, but yeah, it shouldn't have got to that point.
Thank you. Yeah, Ian, if we can.
Is there a member on there of the councillors or cabinet, and who is the portfolio holder for it? Because again, I feel that we are allowed to answer every month questions to portfolio holders as how they're doing their department and all the rest of it, and we don't. I think as members we don't ask these questions, and perhaps it's a fault of all members to not ask questions.
Well, I think Matt's now answered that in that they are reporting on a regular basis to personnel. So it will be the portfolio holder responsible for personnel. Well, John Loudon. Okay, so we'll next cabinet or in advance of that, you might want to put a written question to John in advance of cabinet regarding personnel, or you can raise it with him at cabinet. Okay, but thank you. I think we've covered this report quite well, and thank you, Connor. Unfortunately, you don't get off that lightly because the next agenda. Well, sorry, just to sum up, then we've got a couple of actions here. We need to review the contracts findings of the internal audit report with Melanie at the next meeting, please, Amanda. Okay, and so if everyone's in agreement with that, anything else that I've missed on what we said we'd do? Sorry, Rob. Yep.
So it's not directly related to this, but it's to do with swap and internal audit. So probably now's the time to bring it up. There was an action from a couple meetings ago regarding the fact that strata is done by Devon Audit Partnership and how that would relate to swap. And I reminded, I think, at the last meeting, and there was supposed to be something formally coming back on how that circle's going to be squared. And I don't recall, apologies if I've missed it, I don't recall the formal answer coming back as to how we're going to square that. Again, because it's another big area of risk, and my concern is that again, that's 2 meetings ago, and we still don't, or I don't seem to have a clear response to it.
Simon's going to come in on this. Yeah, thanks.
Yep, understand the committee's concerns around this area. What my answer was at the last meeting, but perhaps been forgotten, I don't know, is that it would appear in the audit plan within the first quarter for that work to be done and reported back to here. So it needs a piece of work in terms of mapping out clearly DAP's responsibility, SWAP's responsibility, Strata's responsibility, and the council's responsibility. So I'm looking at Connor, and I'm sure that's in quarter 1, 6, 7 audit plan.
We are actually about to review the forward plan for internal audit. So yeah, that's the next item. But we'll come to that in a second, Rob, I think. But thank you. All right. So we'll move on to. Sorry, on the. Do I need to? Oh, sorry. Members wish to make any particular recommendations on this item? Sorry, that's the internal. I think that was purely to note, wasn't it, the Internal Audit Act progress report. However, we have said that we will take this action. Do we need a vote on that, do you think? Don't think we do.
From the chair is fine.
Yeah, from the chair. Yeah. No. I will move that from the chair. Thank you very much. Thank you, Amanda. Noted. Great that somebody's on the case. I really, really appreciate that. We will move on to agenda item 9, which is on pages 32 to 57, and this is the internal audit plan and internal audit charter for 26-27. Over to you again, Connor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the report for this one starts on page 34 of the agenda.
Sorry, before you get going, Connor, Matt, if you want to excuse yourself from the rest of the meeting, you're more than welcome, because I know you're a busy man. I don't think that anything's going to crop up that's specific to you. Is that right? Yep. Thanks. Yeah. Sorry, over to you, Connor.
Thank you very much. As I was saying, the report for this one starts on page 34 of the agenda pack. The first thing I'll say is that we've made a decision to sort of change our traditional approach this year. For the last couple of years, we've been bringing 6-month plans to you. With LGR coming, we thought it would probably be more appropriate to put together a sort of a longer term plan. So what we've got a full plan for 26-27, but we've also got the outlines of a plan for 27-28 in this report. Just to clarify, we're only asking you to approve the 26-27 plan today. The 27-28 plan will likely change in some form by this time next year, but we'll be bringing that to you next March to approve. Another thing to note in this report is on page 39 and 40. So that includes a range of information about the service we provide to you. The thing that we do want you to note is that there has been an agreement to reduce the plan next year and the year following. This was part of the budgeting process that the council went through. I just wanted to give you a level of assurance about that. So the first thing to note really is that there's no, in terms of law, there's no legal minimum provision that local authorities have to have for internal audit. It's up to them to decide how big their internal audit service is based on their size, their budget, and their various risk factors. SWAP, as an organisation, we ask all partners to give us a 12 months notice if they're asking to reduce their plan. So this means that because we were asked for the reduction in November or December time, there's a very marginal impact on next year's plan. So that there's not going to be a significant difference between what we do this year as opposed to next year. In 27-28, there will be a larger reduction. The actual impact of that reduction is going to depend on a few various factors, including how many audits that we need to do follow-ups for at that point. But we're still confident that we'll be able to provide you with a significant level of coverage. It will just be less than we have done traditionally. Obviously, at that point, you're going to be in the middle of, well, unless something changes, you're going to be in the middle of preparing for reorganisation anyway, and there's going to be a great amount of stress on officers trying to manage that and day-to-day work on top. So there's possibly less capacity there to support internal audit work anyway. And because of how the transition is likely to work, we're not going to have as much time as we normally would to deliver a full plan anyway. So the annual opinion will likely be 3 months earlier than it normally is. So while there is a reduction, I'm not sure that it's going to have as significant an impact as a normal reduction in normal circumstances would have. We have got a range of partners in SWAP district councils, and of the ones that we have, I mean, you are sort of in the middle or on the higher end of provision anyway, based on your setup and what you do. So we don't have any major overall concerns about the reduction in coverage. I appreciate you may have questions about that, but I just thought I'd talk about that at the moment. If I move on to the actual plan, so I didn't hear that. Hopefully it was nice. So if I move on to the next one, so the actual plan itself. So this is on page, I've skipped forward. It's on page 43 and 44. So this appendix explains what will be in the 26-27 plan and the reasons why it's included. The audits are included for a variety of reasons. Some of them are specific to supporting LGR readiness. There's a couple that will assess legal compliance with existing laws and new laws. And as previously mentioned, there is the strata governance mapping review in there to address the concern that you raised previously about the governance arrangements regarding to strata. There's also a number of key control reviews in the 26-27 plan that we need to get through before LGR happens. And if you move on to page 48, so this is Appendix C. So this table basically sets out how all of the audits that we're suggesting link to the Strategic Risk Register. We've included here audits that we've completed over the last few years as well. So you have 3 years worth of audits that we've done, next year's proposals, and this has also got an outline of what we expect the 27-28 plan to include as well. This hopefully gives you a level of assurance that we are covering all of the strategic risks over this period of time, but I'm happy to take questions on that later. And then Appendix D, which is on page 51, is the internal audit charter that has to be approved annually by the committee. This is the same charter as the last 2 years, so there's no differences between what has been approved before and what we're putting forward now. And that was all I had to say at the moment, so I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Right, questions? Councillor Goodman was first.
On page 43, you've got the risks, but you've got no measurement. So what does 16 mean? Is it is it 1 to 4? Is it 1 to 5? I think we need to put the measurement in there. And a minor point, on page 54, you talk about the Chief Audit Executive. Who is the Chief Audit Executive for EDDC?
So first off, regarding page 43, I have included at the bottom of that table a link to the Council's risk management policy, which is where that...
It's just a small graph to show what is low, what is medium, which is high.
But for the benefit of anyone, it's a 4x4 matrix, so it's a 16 is the highest score you can get. And sorry, you're on page 54, was it? You said?
Chief.
Yeah, so the Chief Audit Executive is my boss, Lisa Fry.
So that is not.
No, we contract out internal audit, and essentially that's how this runs in this organisation. Ian, if I were you, I'd stop digging. Okay. Rob, you wanted to speak. Sorry.
It was perhaps an obvious point that everyone around this room knows, but I don't have any particular concerns about the reduction in the future years on the assumption that LGR goes ahead. Now, I'd never be one to say that central government plans have a habit of changing and don't necessarily pan out. And I appreciate that should LGR not go ahead for any reason, then we've probably got far bigger problems from a financial perspective. But I think if that were the case, you would definitely need to revisit that reduction, because given all what we've said so far, it's not like, you know, the authority is getting really good scores on every audit, and you're going, actually, we could suffer that reduction in advance of LGR specifically. That's fine, but if that doesn't happen for any reason, it's a different issue.
Yeah, I would completely agree with you, actually. And it was, in fact, we discussed it. It was a concern of mine that we were looking to reduce, because actually, you know, the work of internal audit, I think, has been proven by the level of improvements that we've seen. So, you know, it's, I think it was concerning, but I take on board the reassurances that Connor's given as well. Thank you. Okay, Yehudi.
Thanks, Chair. Could I just take you to Strata? I'm on the Strata Scrutiny Committee. Strata, as we know from the Scrutiny Committee, is a private company owned by the three authorities. So it's not really open. It's not a public company, it's not really open. And when I start asking questions in the Scrutiny Committee in Strata, unfortunately, very often, I find that they can't give me an answer because something is commercially sensitive. And then you come to a strategic risk, which is, it is a big risk, cybersecurity. The moment you mention that to the startup people, mouths are zipped. They can't tell you anything, because if they start telling you anything, it becomes public knowledge. They've got to keep everything secret. You know, not tell the hackers what they are doing to find out if we're being hacked and if we're being secure. So what I'm just trying to work out in my head is, what sort of audit can we carry out on a private company with commercial sensitivities and things that they can't tell us?
This comes down to the scope of the audit that's commissioned. And I'll give you some reassurance, Yehudi, that actually the workings of cybersecurity by Strata on behalf of East Devon District Council is scrutinised by the Information Governance Committee. So we have a report every 6 months that committee meets from Strata. So they report to that. Okay, so we get confidential information, if you like, at that point, which we aren't allowed to divulge to the public. But so Councillor Loudon and myself, Melanie Wellman, etc., scrutinise that. Now, in terms of the scope of this of this point, what I believe we've commissioned, and kind of feel free to jump in, is assurance on the completeness of cover of our cybersecurity and our and where Strata's, East Evans, etc. boundaries start and finish, so that we are clear that we are fully covered in terms of their each organisation's responsibilities. But that's is that correct, Connor?
Yes. Short answer.
Just let Simon in at this point. Yeah.
Sorry, and just to add to all those facts, of course we can, if that piece of work in terms of the cyber element fits within Strata's remit that we're contracting them to cover for us, we can certainly, through our share, ask for that to be covered by DAP to give you that assurance as well. So we can influence SWAP's program, but we can also influence DAP's program as well, which we can do.
Ian.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I mean, Councillor Arnott sits as our shareholder on that and goes down, and that meets once or twice a year. So if there's anything you're not happy about, speak to our leader, and at the end of the day, ask him to ask in. We own the company, UD, so they can't keep something secret from that.
No, they can keep something secret on cybersecurity because it all comes from it's a national policy that they're carrying out. We've got to keep quiet. I do get some information from them because I understand some of the technical terms they're telling me, and I'm just drawing.
Okay, thanks. Anybody want to say anything more about this particular item? Yes, Fabian, sorry.
Thank you. I fully appreciate what you said about cybersecurity and the way it is looked after. What about disaster recovery? That is actually a slightly different thing, but if are the contingency provisions, and can you say what they are or not?
I wish you wouldn't put me on the spot like this, but yeah. Yes, the organisation has disaster recovery policies and procedures that have been recently tested, in fact. So, and that's in conjunction with Strata as well. So disaster recovery is in hand. Its effectiveness will only ever be determined really when we have a disaster. I'm not saying if, I'm saying when. So, it does get tested. So it is, policies and procedures are in place to cover disaster recovery, and but the effectiveness of them will only really be proven on a real life incident. Well, yeah, until you actually try and implement, and I've done this in terms of my own organisations. It is slightly different to go through a practice to actually go through the real thing. So that's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to raise concerns where none should be, but yes, the policies and procedures are in place. I should have stopped at that, really. Okay, if there's nothing else on this, we need to formally accept or adopt the charter. And can I just have a show of hands for everybody who's in favour of adopting the SWAP charter for the next year, please? And that's unanimous. Thank you. And secondly, we need to confirm the forward plan for SWAP for the coming year. So can I also have a show of hands on that if you're in favour of it? We aren't. Okay, that's unanimous as well. Thank you. And thank you, Connor. I really appreciate your input in that. That's some really useful. Hang on, sorry. We move on to agenda item 10, which is the financial monitoring report. 2025-26, month 10. A report from Mr. John Symes. Wonderful to see you.
Thank you, Chair. Nice to see you. Yes, so it's exactly that. The report was previously presented to Cabinet, so it's to the end of January. At the highest possible level, the report is confirming there's no material issues and no corrective action having been recommended. So just diving into a bit of the detail, the General Fund is materially on budget. There's service variances described in the report, but the overall forecast outturn is £87,000 favourable. In terms of that HRA, the Housing Revenue Account, this is also being reported on budget. So within that detail, you'll see that income and expenditure both in favourable positions. So that's within 1 or 2% of the agreed budget. So therefore, that favourable position, along with the budgeted contribution to capital, is resulting in a predicted contribution of £1.3 million, which is detailed on the capital aspect of the report as well. And that is after the budgeted transfer of £250,000 back to the HRA balance, as agreed previously. In terms of capital, both the General Fund and the Housing Revenue Account are under budget. So there's been particular issues around staff recruitment, procurement lead-in times, and as members will know, we see slippage most years. So it's kind of expected in some ways, but that will simply result in it being reprofiled and those capital items being delivered in 26-27. Towards the back of the report, there's the traditional Treasury Holdings appendix, so as at the end of January. So again, these remain consistent quarter on quarter, year on year, and again, to the benefit of the General Fund and the HRA, returns are above budget for the year. I understand you also wanted a closure of accounts prep update, Chair, but I'll come back to that after questions.
Okay. Any questions from the committee on the financial monitoring? I would say really appreciate you coming and reviewing that, John. We really want to get to the position where it's a regular item on the agenda going forward. And I know that was not possible for the last couple of meetings that we've had. But it's because we like seeing you here. You know, we really appreciate you turning up. But in seriousness, if we can make that more regular, please, that would be great. Thanks. Okay, so yes, if we can touch on sort of a verbal update on audit, etc.
Thank you again, Chair. Yeah, I've scribbled down some notes. I'll probably do a disservice to the team and how much work is going on, but I'll give you a flavour of where we're at in our preparation. So in terms of external audit, so Grant Thornton, so they've started their planning audit already. So queries and questions are already coming through to the team. Simon's also getting involved in that. So those early questions are going back. Yep. So they're now in, well, they're already in, but officially from next week, but they'll be with us for a month. So it's already a very busy time for the team, sort of as we head into the close down period. But we're hoping that, you know, this planning period now will really pay off in the longer term when the audit itself kicks off in October, November time. So just to give you a flavour of the areas that we'll be looking at through this planning period. So it's going to be business process reviews, walkthroughs, reviewing of estimates, and inquiries of management, legal and internal audit. There's a lot of early testing and initial sampling going on, so fees and charges, grant income, a long list, basically. Payroll, bank rec is in there. So the theory being we will sample 10, 11 months of data to try and get ahead of the game. We can then get working papers together through the summer on that basis. Then come October, we'll only have 1 or 2 months then to reconcile, sample, to complete the data set for those areas. So that's external audit itself. Internally, the team have not stopped since the audit finished. So we've kept a pace with it. So again, we're well prepared. 31st of March cut-off is prepared. So instructions have gone out, requests are being made, system reports are queued and ready to go. In terms of our system, finance system itself, the 31st of March system rollover and the creation of the new budgets is also ready and waiting to go. Budget monitoring does continue month in, month out, but we're putting even more emphasis on it at the moment in terms of getting ready for that cut-off period, so that then we can move into that period 13 and actually put the statements together, which generally will fall into May. All third-party engagement is being made, so external valuers for the housing stock, internal valuers, the pensions team, and getting all that data out to who needs it. And the team themselves are already preparing their own working papers for the notes and the aspects of the statements. Just wanted to pick up on the external audit recommendations that came out of the last audit. Again, we've already making progress on those. Some of them are complete, and wherever possible, we've incorporated them into our plan. So, for example, we've picked up on where extra data was required from external audit. So now we've built that into our own system-generated reports. So that's ready and waiting, just as an example. But like I said, there's so much going on. That's sort of touching the surface, but hopefully that gives you some reassurance in our preparations, Chair.
Brilliant, thank you. Just goes to show, how much work does go into these on a continuous basis, particularly external audit. My understanding is the backstop, and I could have got this wrong, but the backstop date is the end of November for submission of accounts, I believe, for 25, 26.
We both look at each other, Kat.
I think it was February. It was February this year, and I think it got brought forward to end of November. Is my recollection. I could be a year out. I do hope I am, but I don't think I am.
So just to add, while John's looking that up and fill time, but I think I've said to the chair myself in terms of how impressed I am with the team, finance team, in that having got through the audit, which was a great sort of marker for us, to push straight on with the work required for close down and the new audit. The team have gone about it enthusiastically in terms of wanting to improve and get through that audit again. So that's been good. On the negative side, there are a few risks that a particular risk that John hasn't highlighted, and that's around asset valuation that's coming in for this year's accounts in terms of a new requirement on indexation. So that's an area that local authorities generally are struggling at the moment, understanding what the requirement is, the implications on our asset register, and how the updates required for that. So the other areas are the same, and we're improving in terms of picking up on the audit recommendations, but this is a new area that we're having the right conversations, putting the right steps in place, but it is a risk, I would say, at the moment in terms of the audit, in terms of the accounts preparation. And probably John has found a date now.
You found a date, John?
I have, Chair. Now that my heart rate has come back down, you are a year ahead. So for 6-7, it's November. For 5-6, however, it's 31st of January. So in terms of our external audit, we're aiming for the end of November.
Sorry to give you a card in, but yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah, Ian.
Simon said there was a risk there about the assets. What's the risk?
Well, no, it's twofold. One is the technical complexity of it. The guidance that's come out from SIPFA and the interpretation by accountants is differing. So it's the understanding of what needs to be done. We've contacted our auditors to see whether they can give us a view, but understandably, auditors like to comment after the event rather than before the event. So there's just a lot of communication going on in the technical world about how we do this. So basically, if you don't value an asset now, you have to apply an index to keep it pace with various increases. What index you use, how you apply it is the first technical complication. So you want to pick the right index, you want to evidence why you've chosen that, and you want to convince your auditors why you've chosen that. To complicate it further, the Valuation Office was meant to be doing some work on this to help us, but they've confirmed that nationally they're unable to do this in time. So it's down to local authorities to choose the indexing that it feels is appropriate. So there's always a matter of debate over some of that stuff. The other risk is the software that we use needs to be updated to handle the implications of indexing increases in asset valuations. We haven't got that update as yet from our software suppliers.
Sorry, Chair, through you, but so our auditors won't comment because they like to speak after the event, you're saying, and yet they're the ones that have to sign this off. So I don't quite understand. You've got to prove to them what they like, what they find acceptance, but they won't tell you what they're going to find acceptable.
Welcome to my world.
It's the world of accountancy, actually.
But surely we need to have our auditors in, and we should hold our auditors to account as to what is acceptable. Surely.
I don't want to be clear. So I understand their position. Yeah, we'll have those discussions with them. We will consider and talk to them about it, but they won't tell you the right way of doing things. It's up to you to do that.
They review what we've done, not they don't direct us as what to do. Okay, so. Okay, thanks for that, John. It says here that I should invite a vote, but I don't think there is anything to vote on. It's to note. Thank you very much. The report in terms of the external audit and the financial monitoring report. So, thank you. But the next item is also with you, John. So, statement of accounts, review of accounting policies.
Thank you again, Chair. Yeah, so this is just the annual report presenting the policies for the forthcoming production of the 25-26 statement of accounts. So yeah, very much largely unchanged. One change included that's noted at 1.5.1, and it's concerning indexation of PPE. So exactly what we've just talked about. I won't go into too much detail. Yeah, there is risk there. A lot of work's going on in the background. Ultimately, in terms of the accounts, you won't actually see much change. There'd be a lot of change in the background, not a lot in the actual accounts. There's no need for restating any prior years. There's no actual requirement in the code to separately report any movements. So these indexation changes will be treated in the same way as any sort of normal valuation gains and losses. So in terms of the balance sheet, it would just be part of the PPE note, and the revaluation reserves figures is what we're expecting to see. So yeah, I won't go over the issue again, but that's the one change within the policies, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any questions from members? No. Okay. So can I ask us to formally adopt those accounting policies, please? And all those in favour, raise your hand. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thanks, John. Much appreciated. Okay, we come to agenda item 12, which is the risk policy. And we welcome Barry James. So, Barry, you're the interim corporate lead, programs and strategies, it says here. We need to get you a bigger badge, I think.
Well, yes, and since I wrote this, my title has expanded even further. So, yes. Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, everybody. Now, we're a public body. We deal with public money, and we're required to deliver a range of services. So embedding a strong risk culture is important to ensure good governance. We identify risks, we assess the potential for them happening, the potential impact, and we work to mitigate against those impacts. We assign them a score before and after mitigation, and what you see in the papers is the mitigated score. So we have risk owners. They're all attributed, as you will see in the papers, and risk management is an ongoing process, and we use the risk register as an important tool to deal with the risks. Now, it's been a while since this committee's received a report. The last time was July 2025. Due to that member of staff leaving, and I started in late January, but the intention is it's going to be a quarterly event to look forward to. I've used the system that we've got in place now, which are the printouts that you've got, a new system, noting Councillor Barlow's comments earlier that new systems don't always mean that we do things better or more effectively. However, I can assure you from performance management and risk, the new system does appear to be a more effective way for us to deal with the data. So you'll have seen in the papers, there are 3 ratings, red, amber, green. I won't insult anybody's intelligence by saying which is good and which is bad. But red is seen as an unreasonable level of risk, needing constant and active monitoring with measures put in place. And green essentially is an acceptable level of exposure to risk, subject to more passive monitoring. Amber sits in the middle of the two. So in terms of a strategic corporate-wide risks, there are 18 on the strategic register. You can see the split in the papers across the service areas. The mitigated risks are presented 13 medium, 5 low risk, and none were classed as high risk. In terms of the operational risks, well, there's 106 on the register. 64 are classed as medium, 37 as low, and there are 3 rated as high. They're all in place. First one there, I've given a bit of detail in the report. It's about the 5-year housing land supply the council has to demonstrate. Now, the last annual monitoring report showed 3.5 years worth of housing land supply. The impact of this, paragraph, I am a chartered planner, by the way, so I can reel this off, but I'll do it very quickly. There's a paragraph in the National Planning Policy Framework which says if a development comes to the council which demonstrates sustainable development, we should be granting it consent. So outside the planning policy and allocations and all the work that we put into trying to have a robust local plan. So it does have a significant impact on what we do. And the risk owner there has made the comment, well, government changes to housing requirements have significantly worsened the land supply situation. We know the current administration said they will build 1.5 million homes over the 5 years. That then has transferred to additional requirements for district councils such as East Devon. The second one, the second red risk there is income from the community infrastructure levy. So again, linked to planning consents, not giving us enough money to deliver essential infrastructure, which can then hold up the actual developments. And the risk owner's comments there is, well, we need a review of SIL. It's been in place and it should be periodically reviewed. And it's not going to deliver enough money. Everything is getting more expensive, essentially, and we need to ensure we do what we can to attract other funding for infrastructure projects. And finally, then, it's related to the setup of the LATCO of the Environmental Services Limited to deal with waste and recycling. The risk owners put in comments there that plans are in place. I've been to a couple of the project board meetings. It's a robust system of dealing with the risk. There are issues to deal with, and they are on the case, I would say. As I say, we will keep the risk register under review, and we act to deal with the issues, to shift them to green or shift them off the register if we can. And as I say, Chairman, we will come to this committee on a quarterly basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Rob?
Thank you, Chair. I certainly would find it useful, I don't know about councillors, if we could see both the original risk and the mitigated risk in future reports, but also the number, the actual score. And the reason why I say that is if you, although it's not in this report, it was in the internal audit one, and I'm going to come back and sorry, bash everyone over the head about the health and safety again, in that according to the SWOP report, the original inherent risk was 9 and the mitigated risk was 6. Now they're both amber or yellow, but given the audit report we've just had, I'm surprised that we feel that we have a mitigated risk that has gone down to 6. That doesn't feel right. Without the detail, it's difficult to say, but it doesn't feel right. And that's why if it hadn't have been in that SWOT report, you wouldn't be able to see that from this monitoring report. So I think that's why future ones should give the scores because it will help. And something I said earlier on, contracts needs to go on there now, and I'd suggest, if not a red risk, certainly a very high amber risk, because it doesn't seem acceptable that, as far as I can see, isn't on there as a specific risk, and yet, given again the audit we've just got.
Okay. Just whilst we've got Barry, just maybe come back on that, those particular issues, and talk about how what feeds the list, if you like. So if internal audit reports feed the risk register, etc., that would be great.
Yes, thank you. There are a number of mechanisms that risks arrive on the register. So yes, it's a comprehensive, and as you see, there's 106 operational ones, service level ones, and 18 strategic ones. So there is a comprehensive process to make sure we are identifying, and we have people at various levels of the organisation making sure these are fed in to the risk. And Simon, is there a body? Sorry, I'm asking Simon as director here. Is there a body here which monitors the risk register other than officers such as myself?
So the risk register would normally go to SLT on a quarterly basis. So we have slipped on that for the reasons you've identified. So it would come to SLT to get corporate sign-off, if you like.
And in terms of what I've shown in the report, I essentially followed what was done last time, but I certainly take the point that it is really useful to see the original impact and unmitigated risk score as well as the one after. So yes, I'll make sure that in future that will be shown.
Okay, thank you. Rob, do you just want to quickly come back on that one?
It wasn't like that, just another item. I wonder whether it would also be worth considering proximity in the future. So you have likelihood and impact, and that gives you a score. But often when you're dealing with risk, you will deal with how close that risk is, because two things may have the same overall score, but one is potentially a lot closer. The crocodile is nearer one's boat than in other cases. But I appreciate that's probably a bigger issue because it's a change to the risk policy at that point.
I would say as well is we've on this committee we've got a couple of risk experts, and they would love to swim in this for the entire duration of the 2 hours of the meeting. But I think we've got to strike a balance between overview, if you like, and we are essentially an overview committee, and detail, and also bear in mind what level of detail we want to go into in general and display on a public basis. So We're not trying to hide anything. We're just trying to keep it relevant and at the right sort of level for people to be able to scrutinise themselves. But there's probably some sort of line to be trod, if you like, between the two, where we can, yes, open it up to show the unmitigated risk. The detail below that, I'm sure Barry would happily share on a case-by-case basis if you want to delve into it. Does that sound okay to everybody? Is that sensible? Fabian, you're looking very puzzled, but that's very normal for people who look at me. So have a go.
It's the way I am, yes. And the truth is that I am always puzzled. But yes, so you're saying case by case, so we'll get likelihood, impact and mitigation only when quizzed in the meeting? Or?
What I'm suggesting is, yes, in terms of what Rob originally suggested, is the sort of unmitigated score, if you like, but to go beyond that, you're then into a level of detail lower, which is how do you get to the score in the first place? What levels of what are the actions that are being undertaken to mitigate to get it to a revised level? And that's quite a lot of detail.
It would be nice to know whether something is of potentially a huge impact, but not very likely, or very likely, but not a great impact.
Indeed, and that that is the basis that this is built up, I'm sure, Barry, on sort of like bottom-up basis. But yeah, and maybe we can, in these days of technology, allow people to drive through, sort of, or delve into, drill down, whatever the correct phrase is, through the report and into sort of expanding it, etc. Councillor Barlow.
I'm sure you're going to shoot me down here, but I understand the risk for the recycling and waste. I understand that's a big risk to us. That's something we're in control of. We're doing it, and reputationally, and damaging if the waste isn't collected. The 5-year housing land supply. Again, I argue this housing all the time. I sit on planning. It's a risk to our local plan that we're doing, that you can't put the local plan in place unless we have a 5-year housing supply. But, well, Ollie knows more about it than I do. But at the end of the day, we can't control that. We can't change it. We can't make developers build more. Why is that? It's outside of our control totally.
I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. So that's a very specific inquiry in a very specific case. So I would suggest that you ask the Director of Place for an answer on that, rather than this particular committee.
But we put it as a major risk to us.
We haven't. East Devon District Council have. So this is a report that's come to us that's reviewing all risk, and we've got
from SLT.
We've got 106 here. Do you want to review each one?
From SLT? Well, I don't want to review them all. I want to review the ones that are red that we're saying is the highest risk to us. There's only 3 of them.
So we've gone into, we've had an explanation on the 3 that are red. I think we could all debate, long and hard into the night, justification for one way or another, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole on a case-by-case basis. I don't think that's the purpose of this committee. So
Can we then make sure that what Rob has mentioned about the contracts, the things we talked about earlier in the risk, they should be read?
I think that's been heard, and we will look for, whether that's being included or not. But ultimately, we can't put it on there. It's SLT to own it, and it's for them for us to then scrutinise it and challenge it.
So how do we scrutinise and challenge SLT's putting on the wrong things?
It's going to come to us each on a quarterly basis. So, okay. So thanks, Yehudi. You're busting a gut to jump in.
I thought when we have a list of risks, we need to do something about them. Some we can do a lot more than others, and some we can do absolutely nothing about. there are 4 of us in this committee who are owners of the first 2 red risks. And we go on time and time and time again at the committees, ask questions. There's nothing we can do about it. It is totally out of our control. It's what happens in Whitehall and Westminster that decides those risks. So I wouldn't even know how to begin to start mitigating the first 2 risks. And that's really where
And yet, we have a mitigated risk here. So action has been taken to take it to this level, right? And what action is being undertaken to get us to a 5-year land supply is a new local plan is being developed. You know, that is not, that's not, you know, how is that not right? We have to
Well,
demonstrate.
it's very simple, Chair, sorry. The 5-year land supply is when we give planning permission on something, when a developer puts a thing forward and says, we want to build this. But at the end of the day, and there's plenty of land there to do it, but if the developers aren't coming forward to put it forward, then we'll never get to a 5-year land supply. And at the end of the day, we can't make a local plan unless we have a 5-year land supply.
Okay, well, again, this is a rabbit hole that I've broached into, and I really should have backed out of. So we will back out of this rapidly and go into reverse. I'll happily chat about that after the meeting. Yeah, sorry, Ollie.
Yeah, I'm just going to change the subject very quickly.
Go
But yeah, I mean, just to say that's why it's a risk, isn't it? You know, just as government policies are a risk to us, that's why I'm not going to argue about it, Ian, but you know, that is why it's read as a risk, because we can't do an awful lot about it apart from attempt to approve as many things as possible and bring as much as quickly as possible through the planning system. But what I was going to ask about, at the top of page 73, we've talked about comms strategy, and it says there's a risk of not having a robust communication strategy and an agile way to respond to issues could result in reputational damage and ineffective crisis management for the council. Now, the mitigating control is to introduce a communication strategy, and my question is that enough? Because it seems to me that we're not, and I'm not going to go into specifics, but we're not always very quick with our comms strategy in stopping particularly Facebook hares from running, and we really need to try and step in much more quickly sometimes. I'm just wondering if a strategy is enough, or if it depends what's in the strategy, but if it hasn't got a clear kind of mandate on the officers responsible to be monitoring social media, to be made aware very quickly by other teams where there's an issue that could prove to be damaging to our reputation, that they are on the ball there. Would that be covered by the strategy, and is that why we can call it a low risk?
Barry, if you mind.
Yes, Chloe Woodman is our new AD for communications, and I've worked in sort of high pressure environments where I'm always with my comms person because of what's going on. And talking to the strategy is that overarching principles and how we will address things. The detail then is, yes, as you say, monitoring social media, having this is modern local government, isn't it? You know, there is so much noise out there on social media. We have to make sure that we are giving the right messages out, and that will definitely be happening at the right time.
Okay. Blimey. Councillor Goodman.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot with this report. First of all, in July it was agreed that the chair, myself and Rob Wood would meet with the interim performance and risk team leader to consider the full risk register. That never happened. I think I've been about risk for a long time, and I'm one of those people, as the chair says, I did a master's at the age of 55, so I know a little bit about risk. And I have to say, I've never in my life seen a risk register come to me without the initial risk being put on there. because that is crucial, because if you don't put in there, you don't know why you're going to mitigate it. So it's absolutely essential we have that. Then when I look at the report, first of all, on page 43, there is a typo, where it's lack of funding to enable the delivery of required infrastructure is risk 24. It's not, it's risk 22. It needs to be changed before we agree the report. That is a fact before anybody looks at that. Then there are a number of risks where, like for instance, there's no risk rating for, on page 72, Gov 8. On page 83, the number of medium risks, there's a medium risk, but there's no mitigation. Now I could go on, there's several like that. It really is a lot of work that needs to be done on this report, because risk register is a call for action. I accept what's also been said, that often with risks, you have to accept the risk. There's nothing you do. You either put money in take insurance policy, whatever. Sometimes you can't mitigate much else. But the important thing is you have to recognize it. And that's really important. I would say this risk register is a lot still to be done.
Okay, thanks. In terms of detail of typos, etc., perhaps you could forward those to Barry.
I'll send that to you. Yeah,
that would be
absolutely.
appreciated, and then we can pick them
of course.
up. But appreciate the level of depth that you've gone into. Yes. Sorry, Simon.
Sorry, what I was going to say is obviously Barry's inherited this. He is working. He is working with a new system and a new way of classification, a new way of reporting. So it's how much effort is put into changing this when actually we're working behind the scenes on a brand new system. So we've noted comments, or Barry's noted comments, but I would just bear with us in some respect to that aspect.
Okay, Ian.
No, I'm not going to say anymore.
Rob, quickly.
Very briefly, I wondered who the formal risk representative was on this committee, and the reason why I say that is if you read the risk management policy, and I quote, it says, a member of the Audit and Governance Committee will act as a risk representative on behalf of the committee. The member will familiarise themselves with the risk register and meet the management information officer as required. So I wondered who the nominated member councillor was.
So I used to like you, Rob. So I believe it's me. So, but thank you for absolutely highlighting my requirements. Thank you. Okay.
Just one little thing. Strata doesn't have a colour. Why doesn't Strata have a colour?
But there's some.
It just needs to be corrected, I think. But okay, thank you. And Barry, I really appreciate you sort of stepping in here, and in the space of a very short period of time, sort of stepping up to it. But we really appreciate it, and it's great to see the report being presented on what will hopefully be a regular basis now. So yeah, so much appreciated. So it's for us to note, I believe. So I don't think there's anything to vote on, and. Thank you. Where am I? Need to be. Here we go. I will note that from the chair. Thank you. Yeah, I shall move that and stuff. So it says here, agenda item 13, review of the whistleblowing policy, a report from Melanie Wellman, but she can't be here right now. So,
Okay.
Yeah, that would be great. Over to you, James.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a review of the policy that was last reviewed in 2022 to bring it up to date, to update some of the names and organisations that are referred to within it. There's also been some additional strengthening to the text in relation to whistleblowing being done without fear of victimisation, discrimination or disadvantage, and also some extra wording to make it clear that this applies equally to members, staff and members of the public and anyone who wants to bring it forward. I've noticed that there is one typo because I think the recommendations are for it to be approved with or without amendments. I just noted that at 10.1 there's a reference to the next review being in March 26, and that should be March 29. Other than that, it's there for committee's comment or approval. Thank
Any questions? Councillor Goodman.
Yeah, can you clarify what's going to be said on 3.1? Because it used to say, point 3, the council upholds the 7 principles, but the previous one was the council is committed to the highest possible standards of openness, probability and accountability, and this is reflected at the council's value of being open, clear and transparent. We're taking that out. I just wonder why, because I thought it was a really good statement.
You must be looking at something different.
That was the first one. And under 6.3, list of people that they go to, should the chief executive be on there? Because she's not on there, and I'm just wondering.
Sorry, Mike, can we refer to page numbers?
Yeah, oh,
That'd
sorry,
be great.
6.3, whatever page number that is. 6.
5. Oh, sorry. 5 of 12 on the report.
Yes, yeah, page 101, and then it's a list of people, but the chief executive's not on there, and I just wondered if the chief executive ought to be on there.
Why does it have names and not just titles?
Sorry, on page 101, 6.3, I'm not seeing a list of people.
It's got on there, it's a list of people you contact.
Oh, well, oh, sorry, okay, yeah, okay.
I'm just seeing the chief executive, and I did check a few other whistleblowers and other authorities, and they did have the chief executive on there, because if her number 2 needs to if the number 2 is the problem, and the number 3 is not happy with the number 2, there's no. I just wonder why it's not on there.
Why would you have names?
Well, you could have positions, couldn't you? Yeah.
It'd be a lot easier in case they leave.
Well,
sorry.
James, do you want to come back on any of those?
Yeah, so in relation to 3.1, that wording's actually been moved up to a new introduction section at paragraph 1. Right. So it just kind of headlines it. In terms of, I don't know the specifics around the chief exec not being on there, but obviously there are a number of people listed, so there should always be enough people that people could contact. So, for example, if it was Melanie, then they could contact me or vice versa.
If someone very senior had an issue, would they go to somebody other than the chief executive? And I'm just surprised the chief executive's not on there. That's my opinion.
I think it's a fair point to note, and we can take that away. But I think
otherwise it's good.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Rob, did you want to comment on this? No. Okay, great. Ian.
But again, it's all very well having all officers on there. What about someone from the council, an actual councillor? Should the leader of the council be on there if you can report to that or not? I mean,
don't think that's appropriate. I think this is for the organisation and its employees and the public. It's so I don't think it's under the responsibility of, say, the leader of the council to start listening to what could be legal or HR related whistleblowing.
I would definitely concur with that. In terms of what you need to go through when someone whistleblows, there's a whole process and procedure to make sure it's recorded correctly, dealt with correctly. There's training involved. You wouldn't normally get members involved in that process.
Okay, if there's no other questions, then really appreciate you stepping in. Thank you very much, James. And we are asked as the recommendation to firstly, sorry, yes, Ollie.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to point out that in 7.1, the chief executive is listed as the kind of last resort, almost like the ombudsman, if you're not satisfied. So it wouldn't be appropriate to put the chief executive into the list of people that you contact.
That's a great spot. Councillor Goodman, I'm very surprised.
No, that's not what it says. No, that's not what it says. It's the chief executive is used if you're not happy with the outcome. Where actually, if you're concerned about somebody, you don't want the number 2 to the I'm sorry.
Your point's noted.
Yeah,
Your point's noted. That's fine. Okay, we will agree on the noting of the point. But thank you. If there's nothing else, and conscious of the time, I shall move to the voting on this. So the recommendation says that the Audit and Governance Committee review the updated policy and approve the policy, but we do have a typo, so we can approve it subject to that typo, if that's okay. Can I have a show of hands for that, please? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. And it also says that the policy is submitted to full council via the Constitution Working Group for inclusion in the council's constitution. Okay, so and the point about the chief exec being noted as, or being listed, I'm sure James will take that away and refer that back to the SLT for consideration. Okay, thank you. So we move to item 14, which is the Audit and Governance Forward Plan, which is on pages 109 to 110. It's just any questions or comments on the forward plan? Yes, Ian.
Just obviously to add on the things we've discussed today to put in July's meeting, please.
Yeah, so we said that we would add the review of the contract or the internal audit contract report at the next ANG. So if that can be included. And that's for Melanie, please. As you say, health and safety. Yeah. So yes. So we'd identified the health and safety. You want to do the next one? At the next one, please. Yeah. Oh, so what? So I've got the review of the internal audit contract. Yeah. Corporate health and safety. Were we going to review that one as well?
Okay.
I don't think that was an action that was agreed by the committee. Well, it might have been, but you're not the committee, so I don't think that was actually a specific action. So all I've got is the review of the contracts as the action for that.
Yeah, no.
I believe that's the only one. Thank you. Okay, so with that correction, but amendment, is everyone happy with the rest of the Mike?
I just want to take the point that you made, Chris, and Jim spoke about it, is that gave us an update where we are with the final accounts. I found that very useful, and I just wonder where we ought to, whether you make it formal or informal, but being on here would just remind us we need to do it. And I just find it very useful to do that today.
Do we need to list it on here, or we're always going to have Simon and or John here, but yeah, I think as a standing item, if you like, in conjunction with, given how far we've come, it would be great to keep knowing that we're on track, etc., and particularly where we've got.
Don't turn up.
Yeah, that's right. We will find you. Okay. I did have one point which I wanted to potentially look at, which is, and we talked about the monitoring of funds that have been allocated for LGR. Oh, yeah. So whether it's a formal item on the forward plan, or we include it as part of the financial monitoring of that budget line, really, because there were several hundreds of thousands of pounds that were designated by full council towards the costs of LGR. I'd just like to see that it is, I think you said it is being scrutinised elsewhere. So if we could just bring that to the monitoring report, I think. Other than that, if there are no other items, then that's great. And that brings our meeting to an end. And I'd like to thank everyone for taking part. Thank you very much.